We did this with Access in a previous video. Now we're going to look at the SQL data definition language instructions in MySQL. And as we did in Access, we first have to create a database. And before you can create a database, you have to create an object called a connection, which allows you to send commands to and from MySQL. So we need to fire up MySQL Workbench and click on New Connection, and the connection name is, we're going to call CSCI345. So I already have the Workbench going, and we want to click next to MySQL Connections here. Don't worry about the rest of the stuff. It's probably going to look different on your computer, but you should have MySQL Connections here. And we're going to click on a plus sign, which means we want to add a new connection. And we're just going to give a name to it, and it's going to be CSCI345. The rest of the stuff should work. These are the defaults that are used when you install MySQL. And what you want to do is you want to test the connection, and it will ask you for the password that you used when you set up the database in the first place, when you set up MySQL. And it's not going to do that for me because I've already given it my password and told it to remember my password. You should get a message here asking for your password. Type it in and click OK or whatever the button says. And if there's no error, then you should be OK here, and then you just click on OK, and that will show up here. Okay. Now let's flip over back to Word. And what we want to do now is we want to create, they call it a schema. So whenever you see the word schema, just think database. So we want to double click on the connection name, and we're going to create a new schema called VRG. So let's flip back over here. So we want to create a new schema. It looks kind of like a barrel. It's a symbol that's usually used for indicating a disk. And these are supposed to represent platters on a disk, I believe. So we're going to call it VRG, and we're going to click on Apply. It will show us the SQL that's generated from that, which is about as simple as it can possibly get. And that's what we want, so we're going to click on Apply, and we're going to click on Finish. And now over here on the left side, you should see VRG. I don't know if you'll see any other things over here or not, if there are anything default things that might come with MySQL, but you should see VRG. Okay. So that's the database, and what we want to do is we want to make sure that that's the one that we use for the commands we're going to be doing from here on out. So right click on it and then choose Set as Default Schema or Default Database, and it will be highlighted in bold, and the commands that we do in SQL from here on out, unless we change this, will be applied to this particular schema or database. If we have some other windows that are opened up here, you are probably not going to see all of these windows. These are apparently left over from some previous work I did here. So you see a window up here. This is our editor. This is comparable to the one that we had for generating a query in Access. And now what we're going to do is we're going to do the same queries that we did in Access, but now we're going to do them in MySQL. They are almost the same, but there are some differences. So let's flip back over here and take a look. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create the artist table, and I've got some instructions here for doing the stuff that we've already done pretty much. And I've got instructions for saving the scripts. I think we'll skip that part, and I'll make the scripts available to you on our homepage. So this is to create the artist table. It is pretty similar to the one in Access. This, if not exists, will create the table if there's not already one called artist. So it's kind of a safety device to keep you from accidentally writing over a table that might already be there with the same name. If I left that out, it would create the artist table for me just the same as it did in Access, but you are not allowed to put this in the Access version of SQL. If we want to do a surrogate key here like we did in Access, the syntax here is a little bit different. We define it as an integer, but then we say it's going to be auto increment, and there's an underscore there. And the null and not null stuff is the same. These data types are the same. The names of the fields are the same. And the constraints are all the same. And however, there is no provision up here for specifying a starting number for your auto increment field or an increment value. And as far as I know, there is no way of specifying the increment value. The increment value is always 1. But you can specify where it starts. But you have to do that after you've created the table, and you have to do an alter table command. So I'm saying I want to change the table called artist, and I want to set its auto increment starting point at the number 1. Okay, so this is actually 2 SQL instructions. And let's select it, copy it to clipboard, and flip over to MySQL, and let's paste it in. One nice thing about MySQL versus Access is it does keyword highlighting here. Strings are in green and reserved words are in blue, and then other text that you added that's not reserved words is going to be in black. So we got 2 instructions here. Down at the bottom, there's an output window that will show you any messages that are generated by the scripts that you execute up here. And they just keep accumulating down here, and it's a good idea if you remember to just right-click down here and tell it that you want to clear, and that way every time you generate a query or execute a query, the instructions or the output that's down here, the messages, are going to be the ones that are relevant to what you just did. So you'll know for sure which ones apply to what you just executed. So let's go ahead. The lightning bolt is to execute. And we executed 2 instructions down here, and they both have a green and white check mark. That means that they worked. Otherwise, we'd get a red and white X. Now, if we go over here and look at tables, let me make that just a little bit taller here. If I click on tables, there's nothing there. And one thing you need to get in the habit of is there's the little refresh button here. This does not automatically refresh when changes are made. You have to tell it to refresh, and when you do, then the artist table appears. Okay. So let's flip back over to Word. So now we've got our artist table, and the next thing we do is we're going to do our work table. Again, the changes are similar, except we had a memo field, and I decided there is no memo type available in MySQL, so we did varchar 1000. So our memo field or our description field can go up to 1,000 characters. And we had our work IDs starting at the number 500, not starting at 1. So that has to be an additional instruction that alters the table afterwards. So let's take this and let's copy it. Let's flip back over to the workbench and paste that on top of what's there. Let's go ahead and execute that. Click on the lightning bolt to execute it. And I forgot to clear this, but I've got 2 more instructions down here for I'm creating the table work, and the auto increment value is going to start at 500. Again, I need to do a refresh over here, and work should show up over there in my list of tables. I'm going to go down here and clear this. I'm going to go up here and I'm going to hit the delete key and delete that, and then I'm going to flip back over. Okay, now let's move on to our next table. Let's scroll down in our notes here, and we have the trans table. Again, the differences are the same as they have been in the previous versions. We just need to select this and do a Control-C to copy it, and we'll flip back over to our workbench, and we will paste that in. Then let's go ahead and execute it. And we get 2 green and white check marks down here. We need to refresh, and now the trans table is over there as well. Let's flip back over to our notes. Let's scroll down a little bit, and we're going to do the customer artist intersection table. If I leave this part out, it's exactly the same as it was in Access. So select it and copy it to clipboard. Let's flip back over to the workbench, and let's delete what's currently there and paste in what we just put on the clipboard. Let's go down here and remember to clear this out. Execute by clicking on the lightning bolt, and there is no second statement this time because we don't have to do any kind of auto increment field here. So we just need to do a refresh over here, and there is our customer artist intersection table. Let's flip back over to our notes. And that takes care of all of the stuff for creating the tables. And the next stuff is for populating the tables with data, and we'll do that in a separate video.